that I am calling to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Did everybody get a chance to review?
Can I take attendance first?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
okay.
Not on the printed list yet.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes, please,
okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Haggerty?
Here.
Miss Austin? Mr. Montiel?
Here.
Mr. Lopez? Mr. Adams?
Here.
Miss Hupke?
Here.
Mr. Renson? Mr. Kaplan?
Here.
Chair Martinez?
Here. All right, thank you. So now let's move on to that first agenda item, approval of our minutes from last meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from February 4th. Second.
Any discussion? No, I think we're good on the minutes. Can we get a vote?
Mr. Haggerty?
Yes.
Mr. Montiel?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Miss Hupke?
Aye.
Mr. Kaplan?
Aye.
Chair Martinez?
Aye. All right. Has anybody online or signed up for a public forum?
There's somebody online. I will check.
Thank you.
I've got a Kiana online. Do you wish to speak? Panelists declined, or they declined to speak.
Okay, thank you. So no public forum this evening. We will move on into study session.
Good evening, Commission. This is a follow-up to our last study session with the area assessment policies. Last time we went through all of the existing policies and we discussed certain ones. We decided to make it a little bit shorter that way, not go through all of them, but just highlighted ones that we thought worth discussing, as well as giving commissioners a choice to bring any up that they wanted as well. Since then, I found out recently, or shortly after that meeting, that this meeting was available. So I said, yes, I want this meeting to keep going with these area assessment policies. And so we have we've done a comprehensive purging and rewriting of many of these policies to make them better written. Maybe retiring some of the ones that aren't quite relevant today. And so I think we have a pretty comprehensive list of policies. We may, through the process, still add some, so that's still on the table. So for tonight, in the interest of time, I have, as I was compiling these policies, certain ones stood out to me that probably deserve further discussion, and they're probably more on the controversial side, or they're somewhat new, something that maybe hasn't been on the radar in our past plan as well. So that's kind of how I decided what I wanted to highlight for more discussion. And then after we get through all that, then it'll be commissioner's choice to bring up any other policies that they would like to discuss or into the forum. And then we will give a chance for commissioners to offer up any new policies for discussion. And I might follow that up at the very end with just some observations from some survey data that we had gotten back today. In case you didn't know or had forgot, some of these work that we were doing involving the open houses, well, we were able to have our communications department translate all of that into an online surveys, and they pushed that out into the community, and it's been out there for I think 2 weeks, and I think there's still another week to go. But I might just give some anecdotal what I kind of observed from reading through some of that. So let's begin with the northwest area as we usually do. All right, so the first couple of policies are related, and they involve that certain highlighted area there in yellow that was in our current plan that talked about the possibility of building off of the Northwest Greenbelt as an open space and converting a certain amount of industrial land to residential. And so the two policies that speak to that in their rewritten form: preserve and enhance industrial employment areas north of West Dartmouth Avenue, south of West Yale Avenue, east of South Tejon Street, and south of West Warren Avenue. So those areas of I-2 and I-1 the policy would still be that these are important employment areas for the city. Then the next policy, Northwest West 2, explore transitioning industrial properties located between the Northwest Greenbelt, and this should say West Yale Avenue, not College, it's an extra block, to develop a mix of market and affordable single-family residential development in a variety of formats. And so just want to confirm, is the commission in support of these two policies? And should the map, or this is the other question, in the map today, this is just simply yellow, which anticipates townhomes development as the maximum density. Would the commission like to upgrade this to some other a little bit higher type of density, such as missing middle? And so I open up to the commission to speak on that.
Yeah, thank you. Can you maybe clarify when you say the like the boundaries called out as residential transition area in the yellow right now versus the maybe mixed use transition area, what that basically means? What is that committing us to?
So residential transition areas are basically 1 and 2 family developments. They're basically the maximum density that you're looking at is townhome style infill development, attached, and no more than that. Mixed use areas are what we consider missing middle, and so that would allow smaller apartments.
I guess is that still then allowed by the zoning because it's just outside, or is it part of the I-1 so it would be allowed, or would they have to do it?
So today, our zoning doesn't allow any of this. It's our industrial zones do not allow for residential uses of any kind, really, other than maybe work live. So this is obviously, yes, it would be something that, in addition to this policy, there will likely be a strategy that could be selected by council if they want to pursue changes in this area.
I have 2 questions. Is the term missing middle and mixed use conflated throughout? Because, I mean, those are 2 very different things. Mm-hmm. Are those interchangeable throughout this document or throughout the approach? Or,
Generally so. So obviously, mixed use was the term that was in vogue when I first started working here in about 2001. And I remember my director wanting to change R3 zone districts. They were at that time just R3B and R3A. And he, because they were allowed to do, in addition to high density residential, office use as well. And so he wanted to emphasize that, and so we made this change in our 2004 code that we changed the names of those districts to mixed use R3A to be more descriptive. But generally, they allow the density, types of density that would be associated with the upper missing middle type of developments. Missing middle can vary from anywhere from just the townhome level to up to, things like a 15-plex apartment.
okay. Yeah, I guess I'm still kind of confused between, mixed uses where you have retail or commercial mixed with residential versus higher density residential.
Yes, and so that's just the way our zoning is structured, that in those missing middle zones, they also allow mixed use as well. And that's just kind of how it's been developed here. Some places might decide to separate those, but our policies and our zoning history says that we allow them both. In practice, we have very little office uses in these districts. And most likely that wouldn't probably happen here as well.
And in the current code, is the nomenclature R3 still, or is it a CMX, or what does it refer to in the zoning code?
Our mixed use zone districts today are MUR3A, MUR3B, and MUR3C. This area, of course, is just I-1 today.
Mm-hmm. So the proposal is to go to an MU, to support.
I'm asking you.
Yeah.
I'm asking you. Or do you prefer the R2B approach, so the rest of this area to the north of residential is, I believe, R2A, I believe. And so today, basically, the comp plan is saying you should expand R2A into the industrial one. And so that could be our policy still going forward. Or would you like to? And so the argument to upsize that a little bit would be that this land might be expensive to buy because it's a commercial land. And so you may want to be able to viably develop. You might want to have a little more flexibility.
Thank you for talking me through that. That's what my recommendation would be not to limit the options and keep everything on the table.
Yeah, and building, I think on that, I think it's not just that it's at the north end of the I-1, I don't think you're saying this, it's that it's next to that green belt. So what are those opportunities that might be more than just industrial? I think we should support also. So I think that makes sense to kind of keep that higher allowance.
Yeah, I would be in support of a policy to move this towards the mixed use zoning. I think when you look at the amount of residential that's around there, having mixed use in this kind of transitional area has the potential to have neighborhood serving type businesses there, and I think this would be a good spot for that kind of commercial use as well, along with the higher density of residential. So I'd be in support of that.
Eric?
Yeah, I concur with everyone who's spoken so far and changing it to mixed use and increasing the density. The question I have is when we're saying to mix of market and affordable single-family residential, what makes it affordable? Having the higher density, so the land cost per door is less? Is that what we're saying is makes it affordable?
Well, that would help a lot because land is really costly. And so when you really talk about deeply affordable housing, we're talking, yeah, it's going to be apartment buildings. So like our private low-income housing tax credit properties, we have a few of those here, like Traditions is a senior type low-income housing tax credit property. The Trails at Lee Howe is one, and then there's the General Iron apartments as well. And they all take that form of apartments to reduce the land cost as much as possible in a very intensive format, 3 or 4 stories high. That helps to keep those rents at a affordable level. So yeah, that when you talk about affordable, now there's also other types of affordable, like a lot of things that happen in this area in the past have been Habitat for Humanity has purchased a number of lots there and developed them over time, and then they sold them to some of their clientele. So that's really the best example of a single family type affordable type ownership product.
And to be clear here, this is not even advocating or pushing for a rezoning. It's allowing or encouraging developers to come forward with a rezone, or like, we're putting that on the table for developers, right? Or is this something that we are encouraging the city to go ahead and preemptively do? That's my question to you.
It could be that the city would probably need to be more forceful in doing that, most likely. And there would probably be a lot of legwork talking to people and seeing whether it's even viable. And would people be willing, would some of these owners be willing to listen? And there's going to have to be money. So yeah, there's a lot of variables there that we'll all have to align for this to happen, most likely.
Brenda, you have something?
Oh, no, I'll just say what we're doing is we're giving an opportunity for either zoning if somebody wants to go forward and develop the property with the
That's
idea
true.
that this.
You're right.
Yeah.
So if this is in your comprehensive plan, obviously somebody who is a private developer could see that and be interested, and he could go or he or she could go and start talking up these owners and making deals, and could then submit for a rezoning, and he or she would have the backing of the comprehensive plan.
So, yeah, I'm for it.
Carl?
What is the definition of middle housing? Middle?
Missing middle housing.
Yeah, is it like occupancy or cost or size? What?
So that's a term that was coined by, I can't remember his name offhand, but he's an architect out in Berkeley for a small firm called Opticos Design. And his observations of what happens in development today is that we have on this end, we have single family, and maybe you have the attached townhome style development. And then on this other end, you have these mega giant apartment complexes that are such as maybe Oxford Station Apartments or the Bell Cherry Hills. They're very large developments of apartments. And there's, in between there's really nothing you can point to today that's being built like that. Although you can go back and look in old parts of Inglewood and see that. You can see that small 1970 apartment building over by the medical district that's 20 or 30 units. But none of that gets built anymore because of the way a lot of it has to do with how zoning evolved. Shortly after the 1970s, people didn't really like those changes at the hospital area, so they made zoning very difficult. And so that's one of the reasons. But then also, and so a lot of those people small-time developers just don't even exist. So they either concentrate on the single or two family homes, or they're big apartment developers, and we have very little in between. So that's what missing middle is, and we're trying to revive that type of development in appropriate areas of the city.
So I think, and somebody jump in if I'm wrong, but I think I hear general consensus in support of increasing the zoning options for that area.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the second one that was brought up, this is something kind of new that was not probably thought of or talked about in our current comprehensive plan, but it's become a big thing with affordable housing. So this area that between Santa Fe and South Platte River Drive is where we have 7 mobile home type properties in Inglewood that previously a lot of times could be ignored, or if they weren't ignored, they also could often have problems. When we look back into our old records in our community development department, we see a lot of that kind of thing involved in those records, cases, files, that there were some problems over time. But of course, this is something that, these are very affordable places for people to live. And this is something that obviously maybe the city doesn't want to lose. And so this is something maybe that I've written this policy as something where maybe the city needs to evaluate these conditions of these mobile home properties for the purpose of developing strategies to preserve, enhance, or replace these units. So that's the first policy. And the second policy is about transitional housing. And transitional housing, a lot of people have talked about, well, for homeless people, could we just build a lot of tiny homes for them? And this is actually starting to happen in Denver, up north of here, on just west of Santa Fe. Denver has developed a transitional housing property that consists of these tiny homes that is meant to be a temporary place for homeless people until they can get a more permanent, be placed in a more permanent type of housing somewhere else. And so this may be a strategy that Inglewood may consider. I'm sure it was talked about a little bit in the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations. And so the thought process here is that this could also be controversial. It is controversial up north in the Overland neighborhood. There is a residential area there. The beauty of this is that this is probably in an area that would not generate that much controversy because it's kind of isolated from single-family neighborhoods. And there may be one of the opportunities that the city might have is that, here at this location, we have our wastewater treatment plant as well as our service center. So the city owns approximately a fourth of this area. And so obviously there's a lot of infrastructure on that land, but there may be an opportunity to clear a little bit of that land for a transitional housing property. So that is why does the background to those potential proposed policies, and so we'd like to know if the commission is in support of these.
John, I really appreciate the language you put into number 4 there about preserving, enhancing, and replacing deeply affordable housing units. That's the issue all across the country. If these places like this get swept away, and in the name of development, in the name of progress, and we lose units. And so I really appreciate that preservation piece. Currently, mobile home parks or parks like this are allowed in I districts, right?
Yes, I think that's really the only place they are allowed is I districts.
Okay. I do like number 5 there of exploring novel and housing solutions that are not typical and supporting those in districts like this, whether that's some sort of expansion of mobile home type units or small units in I districts. I'm in support of that. Anyone else? Noah.
The trailer parks down there, Dartmouth and Santa Fe, do we have any idea what the rent is on those? I mean, that's probably the most affordable spot in Inglewood.
So typically, for most of those trailers are owned by the residents, and they have to pay a lot rent. And the last I heard, but I could be way off because I haven't really paid that much attention, but that my thinking is that it's probably like $500 a month. But that might be old data. I don't know.
I'd be surprised if it's up to 500, but that is very high density in the trailer park. Some of the trailer parks are a little better and some of them are a little tighter, but that's a good location right there on the corner of Dartmouth and Santa Fe. But you take those. You scrape all those trailer parks to build apartments or whatever, and I don't know where those people are going to go.
Yeah. So yeah, it's
they're not going to be able to afford a $1,500 apartment.
No. I think that now the city also, I have to say, this area was also part of this area, at least south of Dartmouth, was also identified as a TOD type development area in our stationary master plan from 2012. And at that time, mobile home parks were like, what's the big deal? Now, if the city wanted to still go that direction, and that's a very long-term proposition because it all depends on so much infrastructure being put in there, because there's, there'd have to be this big bridge coming from Inglewood Station over there across all the tracks in the street, as well as a new roadway and probably other bridges as well across the river. It could be that maybe in part of this, that some of that could be preserved, some of that mobile homes. Could be that they may decide maybe they move somewhere else in the community. I've thought about the possibility of Union Avenue near Centennial Park as a potential location. So we don't know about that part of it.
Does the water treatment plant, they can expand north. Are they in need of any more property?
The wastewater treatment plant?
Yeah.
Well, if they went farther north, they'd be in Denver. So I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I've never really heard. But that's a good question. Maybe I should be asking that of the director.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciate staff coming forward proactively with these policies. I mean, you're right. It was along the lines of what we talked about last time in some of these areas, but I think these are really well stated. So thanks for bringing it to us.
Yep, also support.
Anybody else on these two? All right, keep going.
Okay, northwest east of Santa Fe Drive. This is something that's called for in our current plan, talking about these mixed-use transition areas that are up against the new developments there along Santa Fe, including the General Ironworks area and those new apartments. They've changed the name. I can't remember the name. Farther south, but anyway, these areas are typically zoned. They're right up against those areas, and they're typically zoned I-1, And but they're not totally industrial. They have a mix of underutilized industrial and as well as some single family that's a lot of times in not very good condition. The policy, should we continue with this policy, explore expansion of missing middle housing opportunities adjacent to the Broadway commercial corridor, as well as the Sand Creek investors and WH investors planned unit developments. So this also lumps in Broadway as well as being adjacent to that Broadway corridor. This is also a policy of ours is to, this is a mixed-use transitional area along Acoma Street. Is the commission in support, still in support of these policies?
Brenda?
Well, I just got to ask, I tried to Google search, what is the Sand Creek investors and WH investors properties that we're talking about?
So that, unfortunately, I was just lazy and just went and looked at my zoning map. And so they're planned unit developments, and those are the property, that was what their names were when they did their PUDs.
That's the Ironworks, is what you're saying?
Excuse me?
That's the Ironworks, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
then the one farther south was the crane business, the Winslow Crane.
All right.
And maybe I should rename those so it'd be more clear to most people.
This
Sorry,
is just
no.
a continuation of what we already have though, right? The question is, are we in support of this policy? There's not big changes here.
No.
No, right, we're just continuing on.
No.
Okay, well, I'm fine with that.
So this one to me is different from what we talked about before, and I do actually think that separating the ideas of mixed use from missing middle makes more sense here, in the sense that you've got the Broadway commercial corridor. So you don't need to expand mixed use to expand commercial potential off of that corridor. Missing middle to me in this area means trying to incrementally increase density so that more people can live in close proximity to that existing commercial corridor and transit corridor, which makes total sense. So I think this is where, the way that it's phrased in this policy statement around missing middle housing, and then the way that the actual zoning is labeled as mixed use, to me are saying two separate things. And I would like to see us talk about this as, middle density housing as opposed to mixed use.
Well, that is a good point because as I mentioned, there's almost, these things have been historically mixed use, but there's not really that many mixed uses in there and probably never will be. Typically what they are is somebody takes a house and makes an office out of it. That's typically what it is. And so maybe it's the time to go away from that term that my director was so in love with 20 years ago. And maybe it's time for something other way to describe it.
Yeah, I think it was well said by Noah to really talk about adding the right kind of density rather than multiple use types for this area. Anybody else on this one?
Yeah.
Eric?
If you look at the lot standards for the MUR 3A zones, you can have a detached single-family home and up to 3 ADUs. So the question from me to the commission is, would it make sense to be able to split those MUR 3A lots, subdivide them in order to build smaller housing, kind of the same way you can split a corner lot 1/3 and 2/3 and build 2 homes there?
Eric, I think that's a well-described strategy for getting that missing middle that we're talking about. And again, not dialing us in or locking us into any 1 or 2 or 3 strategies, but knowing that could be something that's on the table, I think I'm in support of.
I think the only thing that would be different than what's current is you would have one owner in the MUR 3A zones now, and they would be renting them out. This would give people an opportunity to own their own, I'd call it micro home or something.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're looking at is the opportunity to expand like our courtyard pattern homes into areas like that, which would allow smaller homes, smaller lots, but ownership.
I thought you could actually do 3 units on an MUR 3A, not just 3.
Well, I think what Eric is trying to get at is being able to split those so that they could be individually owned. Now, theoretically, you could build something, you could build these 3 different attached units, and you could probably theoretically condoize it. But, there's some downsides probably to that as well. Some people would probably rather just have, this is my land and my house and separate from that neighbor.
Yeah, if you look at the lot standards on a MUR 3A, you can have a multi-unit house, 2 to 4 units, or you can have attached houses that are 2 to 6 units. All of those would have party walls, and this would give someone an opportunity to own a small, single-family home
You're right.
on a small lot.
And the caveat to that is that we would have to probably make that change to decrease the lot size to make that happen. Right now, you can divide them up, but there has to be meet a minimum size, and that's typically going to have to be all the way back to the entire length of the lot. And I think what you're getting at is being able to split out those backyards, kind of like the corner lots.
Carl?
A 75-foot lot, you could put like probably up to like 5 small modular buildings on there. And modular homes, I haven't heard a whole lot of talk about that, but they're really nice, actually. All you need is the property and foundation, and they come in and drop the house down. And they're very sturdy. They'll last forever. Probably a lot longer than the way they're building houses now.
Yes, modular is one of those things where that is going to be probably a key to increasing affordability. There is innovations that are exciting, where apartment builders are developing apartments that are kind of like a building blocks where they're putting in these different modular units side by side, connecting them to create a larger apartment building. So that's very exciting. Our code doesn't say that you can't do any of that. Modular is fine by our code. It just has to be attached to a foundation. Hopefully we can see more of that in the future.
Brenda?
Go ahead, Carl. You weren't done.
Like in industrial area somewhere, you can take like an acre lot and make a little village of them, as long as you have access to it from the streets.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Yeah, well, I just have a clarifying question. I thought our Title 16 did change and make it the ability to split the lots on the ends, on the corner, right?
But not the interior.
What?
But not interior of the block.
Interior of the lot.
Interior of the block.
Oh, of the block.
So no, you can't do those types of splits interior of the block. You can do it only on the corners.
Oh, that's your ADU. That's what you mean. Yeah, you can split. You can take your garage. You can't split the lot like you have a house and a garage, and you can't split the lot anymore because I thought we did that.
You can't. So you have to be directly on a street, and so when you're not on the corner, you're in the interior of the block. you cannot, yes, you can split, like, say, if you have a 50-foot lot, you can split into two 25s. But I think what's being talked about here is there's this other concept that's very new in America.
I'm aware of the other concept. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
it.
And so the other concept is to allow someone to split off their backyard and build a separate and sell that off. And yes, that's something that there is some interest here in the community to do that. But there's not a lot of examples yet in the country, only pretty much in California.
Okay, maybe I'm not being clear then, because we have these all over Inglewood.
Oh.
All right, on Oxford, driving on Oxford, here's the house, here's the garage. The house faces Oxford. It's its own lot. Actually, we have a number of
Yeah,
those.
those are the end
Yes.
frame lots.
Can
Yeah,
I
that's
chime
what I'm
in?
talking about.
We have a lot of stuff that was developed before we ever had zoning in our city, which is what, when we were working on the code to rewrite, we thought, well, we hear a lot of concern about increasing density by saying duplex, triplex, quadplexes are allowed everywhere. So we thought, well, let's look back at what's already here and we'll make amendments to our code to mimic what we've already got, because it seems to be fitting in very well with our neighborhoods. So the front rear corner lot subdivision was created. That's only allowed in the R1 districts. It's not allowed above that. So the R2s, our MUR3s don't get access to that. But that's, I think what Eric was saying was maybe we can start pushing some of these things into those other districts. The courtyard pattern homes are only allowed in the R1 districts. In the R2 districts and the MUR3 districts, what we did was shrink the minimum lot size for a single family home from 6,000 to 3,000 square feet to allow the development of more single family. We shrunk the lot size for attached products, so townhome style products, so that we can get more of those. We haven't seen it all start coming in yet. We do track to try to see what effect did Code Next actually have on our housing market. So we do keep some of those numbers and watch as those projects come in. But I think the idea that is kind of being discussed is maybe we should think about trying to find more ways to bring those smaller lots that we've already created and make them even smaller allowances. I think John will touch on this as he goes through, but we have a lot of state legislature that we're working on. We've met with council on, and some of the policies that you'll see in here are reflections of some of those conversations. And one of the conversations with ADUs is that to become an ADU, what is the terminology? An ADU compliant city? I can't remember what it is. Supportive city. You get this list of objectives that you can work through. And one of them is to find a means for which people can actually subdivide their ADUs off and sell them. We don't know what that looks like. We're working through our first shot of something like that with the front and rear corner lot subdivision and working through utilities and all those. I don't know of any other cities that have figured out how to do that. I've seen some architects talk about people need to figure out how to do that. I just don't know what that looks like yet. But you know, the comp plan kind of gives us a general direction of what we can explore. And that's what I think John is saying. What do we want to explore? And then we can start working on the details.
Yeah, so let's get us back to that higher level. Eric, did you have anything you wanted to add? So you're light on earlier. Okay. Yeah, so generally in support of increasing density in this way. Yeah, thanks.
So that's a good segue. And I want to draw your attention to the map, this blue line here. And so what is that? So in terms of this recent law that was passed last year by the state legislation, it's called transit-oriented communities. And it requires you to calculate your density, your current zoned density capacity within either a quarter or half mile of your light rail stations, as well as a quarter mile of high frequency bus corridors. And so Broadway, at least from Yale to 285, is considered a high frequency bus corridor. And so we are compelled to study this area where this blue line is, and it basically is a quarter mile from Broadway. And what that ends up being is Delaware on the west and Logan Street on the east. And so you will start seeing, as we go through these slides, policies that are directly related to that boundary. The other good thing about that boundary that we are very fortunate is that our comp plan that we have now use that same boundary generally, that quarter mile distance from Broadway, because it is a planning standard.
John, quick question. Is Broadway and Yale the only high-frequency bus corridor in Inglewood? Is Downing,
There are others. Evans Avenue, way up north, is a high-frequency corridor, but we don't really have a lot of land on that one. The Federal Boulevard corridor is one as well, which would touch basically southwest Inglewood. And today, the Broadway corridor south of 285 does not meet that standard, but we anticipate that it will, because eventually the bus rapid transit is supposed to come there. Moving on to the Northeast. Northeast 2. So this is very similar stuff. We start, you'll see kind of a pattern over and over. So obviously we have our Broadway corridor, which is our catalytic activity area. And then our policies are explore expansion of missing middle housing opportunities adjacent to that Broadway commercial corridor, and evaluate options for infill townhome development within a quarter mile of the Broadway corridor.
John, these seem to be speaking the same, getting at the same point of increasing density along this. Is there a specific reason to call out townhomes specifically, rather just increasing missing middle opportunities?
So I think what the idea is that there's a kind of a gradient of density that slopes down from the Broadway corridor. That's kind of been the concept of how our zoning is in Inglewood, and that's been carried through with the comprehensive plan to kind of continue that. It may involve shifting the boundaries a little bit, but the concept basically is that it's Broadway high density, and then right next to it, you step down to this missing middle area that is more about residential than commercial and at a smaller scale. And then you take another step down to the townhome infill area. And then finally, the final step is a pure single family area, and which we do highlight in gray. That's how we've depicted it in our comprehensive plan. And it does fit with it fits generally with the transit-oriented communities boundary as well. And so now, yes, this area is something that we probably want to study a little bit. We don't know exactly, are these boundaries, the zoning boundaries, are we happy with them, or do we want to tweak them a little bit? And so that could mean maybe you move that mixed use area to include the other side of Acoma Street. Maybe you move that boundary for R2B to cover one more block to the east. We don't know.
Any discussion on this one? Carl?
Does the corridor take into effect the circles that are going to be put into on Logan? Traffic circles?
I believe Dartmouth, you mean?
Well, it'll be at Dartmouth and Logan.
I don't believe they're really correlated, quite frankly.
Because is that for uh, fast traffic, of like moving people quickly, a bus route, or?
So the focus is the Broadway corridor, and that's where bus rapid transit is supposed to occur. And the idea of that would be that you would have to no more than 5 minute wait for a bus. So yes, it's really there's a push for that kind of transit. They're starting to build the Colfax one today. So in a few years, we'll get to see how that operates, and that might give us a glimpse of what could happen on Broadway. The focus is really probably not the Dartmouth corridor. That's really more about. I think they're trying to. They got a grant from the federal government, and it was really safety oriented. And the thought process, I think, there is that these roundabouts will greatly slow people, yet not necessarily impede them for significant amounts of time. So it's kind of thought of as a traffic calming project.
Just curiosity, the quarter mile, half mile, and those circles, those were created before COVID, when our parking lot out here was jam-packed, and there was a lot of traffic and on the light rail. Are those still valid?
Yes, they are. We still believe that we still feel that transit will most likely recover over time as things change, as RTD is able to make more improvements, particularly security. So yes, we believe that the stations will recover, and that these still make sense based on the investment that the region has made. That these areas should be considered for higher density housing.
And one thing I might add is there's still some conversations that we're going to have to work on with council and you all in association with the transit-oriented communities bill. Right now, so I'll give you the gist of it. The law creates a housing opportunity goal for each community, right? We get this kind of formula that we have to go through and identify this goal, and it's this number that we as a city would have to have zoning capacity for in that area. So we've done some, as John calls them, back at napkin numbers, and worked through the tools that the state government has given us. And we think we already meet our goals just through Code Next. The changes that Code Next did, we're able to meet that goal already. But the rest of the conversation is council has the ability, or the city has the ability, to manipulate that boundary as long as you still meet that goal. And so do they want to, because right now it covers, you can see that it covers areas of R1C, R2B, is it really focused right around our transit hubs, or is it covering these larger swaths? And so that those conversations are going to continue, that will evolve even with this information, as far as where do we see that transit center, or is it, okay, there's a transit oriented community, there's a transit area, and then there's a transit center. I think, or a neighborhood center. I think I'm getting all their terminology right. That we will identify at a later date that says, here's where we really want to focus everything in these areas. So I think it sounds like folks are kind of hesitant to say, hey, let's just move on and do this. But understand that there are other things that are coming that we're going to have to work through as a group with council, with you all, on where are we going to go from here. So understand that, this conversation is going to continue to evolve, even with the comp plan, that we're still going to be sorting through all of the ramifications of all those state bills, state laws that we're having to work through. We're hoping to get started on that in the next few months to try to get through certain items of it that we need to get through first. And then we have, triage of things that we have to do. at any given time, and sets of deadlines for each law that we have to meet. And then there's reporting things that we have to do every 3 years with a bunch of the other laws. So just know that these conversations are going to be continuous conversations over time.
Yeah, all we're really saying today is that this Broadway corridor between Broadway and Logan, we need to have a conversation about it. And so that's really, and it kind of frames it a little bit, what needs to be discussed, but no decisions have been made and won't be in this comp plan.
Yeah.
Because we would never get this comp plan done
Right.
if we tried to do all that.
So do any of the commissioners have any objections to these two, NE2 and NE3 as written? Let's go.
All right, Central. So Central, we've broken things up into 3 different areas, which matches our Downtown Development Authority and how we've always discussed them historically in the city. We have Inglewood Station area, and then we also have the Main Street Broadway area, and we have the Wellness District. So starting for Inglewood Station, our 3 policies that we're really looking at land use wise here are explore zoning options for the I-1 zone district area located between Hampton and Kenyon to facilitate transit supportive redevelopment projects. So this area is currently in I-1 primarily. It was historically a location of a lot of carnation greenhouses, but there are none of those there today. And so that's historically why it was I-1. And there is almost no pure industrial use there today. Obviously, you know that this is highway commercial. There's lots of offices in here. And so it really probably doesn't make sense to continue on this path. And obviously, with the way our industrial is it doesn't allow housing by right, but the market sure wants to come here because it's right close to the station. There's some good values in terms of land prices, and so we've had recently in the last few years 4 different planned unit developments here, and so you have to ask why should we be continuing that. The second policy, explore expansion of missing middle housing opportunities within the mixed-use residential zone districts located between Hampton and Kenyon. And so that area is this orange area that is a mix of different single-use townhomes and apartment buildings. And so this is considered our missing middle MUR 3B area. And then the final one is to evaluate options for infill townhome development between West Floyd Avenue and West Eastman Avenue up here. And so in this area up here is primarily R2, and we've seen there's a lot of demand to develop infill townhome style development in here. This area is R1C, but it is very, very close to Inglewood Station. It's very transit oriented in terms of location. And so that is another possibility to look at. And so does the commission support all 3 of these policies or only some?
Brenda.
Okay. I'm, of course, very supportive of CSES3, of course. And CSE4, I think we need to be maybe a little sensitive about the brown that you were pointing out. That's all single-family homes, very old. I'm a maybe on that. On CSE5, I would just not recommend making any changes to that area at this time or take that to council because I would forecast a lot of pushback based on what we heard from Code Next. That's my recommendation.
I agree with the pushback. I was here for those meetings. I do have to say, though, that your idea or your concept earlier of a gradient as it of density as it meets up to these larger MU districts makes a lot of sense, especially in proximity to the station. Could be a tough one. I would be for it, but could be a tough one. Noah?
Yeah, I would just second what Aaron said as far as getting that, that gradient from the station and trying to increase the density close to the station. And then I'm also unsure about the specificity around townhome development. And I think, again, it was mentioned before, and just thinking about broader language around, infill density that doesn't have to specify the model.
Carl?
The higher density, or the quote, missing middle between Hampton and Kenyon. I don't see the purpose in building in there when across Hampton it's going to be completely rebuilt over there. So I think leave as much businesses on the south side of Hampton, and then when all the apartments are built on the north side of Hampton, then that'll be your density for the area there to support it. Do we have any kind of plans for that area?
No, we do not.
New Englewood?
You're talking about this area here, MUR3B?
No, the
Cinderella City.
No, I think he'd like to see Center City, sorry.
24-hour fitness and
Yeah.
Harbor Freight, Ross's,
Yeah.
Petco.
I believe there are policies that we have in our chart that was attached. I just didn't think they were worth bringing up. But if you want to bring them up in your commissioner's choice, that's fine. But yes, the city is still working on some significant redevelopments here at City Center.
I think, Carl, are you asking if there's an update on like a new developer? Is that your question?
Yeah, it's it's probably going to be mixed use with mostly apartments, I would assume. I don't know. I don't know what their plan is. I don't have that kind of money, so I don't know.
I've got one more thought on the CES 5. Because of the R1C, I do think in this specific area, it does make sense for the townhome specific discussion as opposed to maybe something else there. But I don't know that I would really push for that. But in my thought process on it, it does make sense in this particular one. So just wanted to.
Yeah, I think that word might make things a little bit more palatable. Again, it seems pretty specific for a comp plan, but maybe there's a balance to be found.
And yeah, maybe it is just then increased density, but something like that. Okay.
Thank you for that. We probably will try to massage that a bit.
Yeah,
So
I
in
would
general-
say, remember that we've approved 3 PUDs in that area for MRA, 1 townhome, and then 2, I think 1 condo, and then 1 multifamily. And there's always hope every year that at the legislature, they might work on that condo defects law to make things a little bit more palatable to build condos. I know there's developers that have always asked if we allow them, and we tell them, we don't restrict them, but
The insurance industry does.
They don't
That's
get built.
restricted.
But those are all south of Hampton, right? Not in the R1, not in the Floyd to Eastman area.
No, sorry, I thought we were still talking about Southampton. No, nothing up there in the R1C. The only things that we've added to that area would be ADUs, front and rear corner lots, and courtyard patterns, just do code next.
Brenda, you have something?
Well, yeah, I'll just say that it may be that we redevelop Central City and it fills up enough density to where developers don't want to build south. I mean, that might happen, but like he was saying, the land is cheap. We have a giant parking lot over there that's not really being used, and those office buildings on a laddie there across from McDonald's are really old. That's what I'm hearing from the tenants who actually are in there. So I would say that I would like to push the CES3 zoning. I think that's a good idea, and we relax a little bit on that north part. That's all.
I'm hearing a consensus of support. All right.
All right, Central Main Street. So here we have encourage expansion of the South Broadway Main Street business cluster area to the north of Floyd Avenue around the Gothic Theater. So obviously this is our north side of Broadway downtown, and we have some downtown style businesses, Whiskey Biscuit, Moe's, and we have the stupid US West Quest building. And then we have the Gothic Theater, and then that's the end. And then we just have, auto uses. And so do you support, my question would be, do you support the city trying to make changes there to expand downtown to include redevelopment that would reach to Eastman Avenue? And then on the south side, south of the interchange, this area is very walkable to down the core, but it probably is because of this interchange not really conducive to additional retail. And so this may be more akin to what's over here on the other side. Is this an area where we want to support new higher density housing that would anchor the downtown?
Colin?
Yes.
I agree. I think these are both great goals and pretty well written. Anybody else? All right, let's keep moving on then.
Wellness district. So first one is work with hospitals to plan for expansion needs within the M1 and M2 medical zone districts and the MUB1 central business district. We do know, we've talked to real estate people at Swedish, and apparently the Synergy building is starting to fill up, and the current Swedish mobs are all filled up. And so they're always planning for the future, and the future says that Swedish and Craig are going to keep getting bigger. And so they are thinking about the possibility for where would a new Swedish medical office building go. So we're working. So this space is just saying that the city should work with these hospitals within these certain zone districts that we have been long-standing policy is that that's what these zone districts were created for, to keep working with them to help them find and acquire sites for that kind of development.
Comments? Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing that you've got potential map conflicts there. Maybe you could touch on what you're alluding to with that.
Okay. That comes a little bit later. So
Okay.
That's where I'm showing those potential map conflicts are residential areas that are not eligible for hospital buildings. So what this policy is basically saying keep hospital and work with hospitals in the hospital zones, but not outside them.
So not change. So basically just within the areas that are already currently identified, not letting them expand out past those.
Within those, not past them.
Not allowing them to go past those.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I'm in support of that.
I think sort of along those same lines that the wording of CW1, work with hospital, I mean, it just feels like, let's figure out how to get the hospitals what they want. And I think there's a real opportunity to make sure that these very large businesses are anchored in our community and work with our city so that it's mutually beneficial. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe there's some wording there or something to, like, to me, this reads like, let's figure out how to get them what they want.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda.
Well, yeah, I can just add that the hospital gets what they want. They're our main business, and that's okay. But the people who spoke up at your workshop and the people who are showing up city council meeting are predominantly coming from this area. And I can understand, it's very shocky. I was at, change is. So I would just encourage you to I support our business partner while being sensitive to the residential area in some kind of language.
That's fair enough. And yes, maybe I think that makes a lot of sense because that was the dynamic that we were working with in this area about 15 years ago. And it was, the zoning at that time was this R3B zone district that didn't make any sense for this type of development at all. And everything had to be done by PUDs or PDs. And there was always the fear that the hospitals would branch out. And so we were cognizant of that when we were dealing with this area. And the whole premise of this new zoning was to rezone areas where the hospitals primarily were already located at, as well as certain areas that were near the highway, and let them go up. Let them go up, not out. And so I think those things are implicit in that, but we can say that we can massage this policy so that that's more clear and make people more comfortable.
You might see where that's evident with the new Confluence apartment complex, how it steps back off of Girard. And that's because of the height reductions or height limitations that were placed in those areas along those boundaries that they had with the residential district. And then the building shifts back into an area. So the work that John did 15 years ago is becoming much more evident to those that know what the rules are.
It's a very difficult area because it's like that area where the hospitals are in that 3400 block, it allows, 144 feet. And then we did try to work our way in with this gradient to go so that in the first 100 feet off of Girard, they had to go down to 60 feet. They couldn't put that 144 feet right up against Girard. And then it steps down to even, single family. And so it's an unnatural gradient. It's very steep, but we're still trying to figure out and a way to, somehow have that gradient in there, whether it's super steep or not.
Colin?
I was thinking about I'm in this area and there's a couple of pocket parks, if you will, that are probably unofficial parks. Is this the right place to put in, kind of conserve some of those green spaces? Because I will say that Girard apartment took one of those lovely green areas that had some great old trees, and it's a very cool apartment complex, and there's going to be a lot of benefit to it. But I think we lost kind of a asset to that area. Is there a way to kind of say that, try to maintain some of those open spaces so all of a sudden those don't become developments as well? Because I do think that it's important to keep some of those where we can increase the density, sure, but let's also try to keep the green spaces that we have.
Thank you for that. Yes, I believe that is something that the Inglewood Downtown Development Authority Director is also interested in as well. Yes, this is a challenged area in terms of that as well. And just on a good note, that Craig Hospital is, they are working on expansion, which will but part of their expansion is that they have tabbed the northwest corner of Girard and Clarkson for a new community garden. So just to let you know that. But that's something that I will see if I can work in as another policy.
Anybody else? All right. Let's keep going.
Okay, so this is where there's some conflicts on this. So CW4 says evaluate options for infill townhome development between East Girard and Floyd Avenue on South Logan, Pennsylvania, and Pearl Streets. The map shows, so just this is this area where we're between the single family and then the hospitals, and these are these transition areas. Right north of Craig, we do have this MUR3C historically is more dense, and that we're continuing those policies, but then it's like these are R1 areas. They are colored as potential for something else, for other infill, a little bit higher density. But at the same time, we know that there's a lot of sensitivity around this kind of thing in this, especially in probably this area right here. And so I remember during the comprehensive plan in 2016, somebody who lived here basically saw this map and asked for their area to be excluded. So we did make that change. So this is a hot, potentially hot area. And so I'm not quite sure what we want to do with that. The other conflict area is this area, this R2B area that's changed quite a bit since the comp plan. And historically, we tried to engage this area 15 years ago in the rezoning process. These people just didn't want to participate. They were just they just refused to come to meetings and didn't want to participate. And so we thought this area was another more hospital-like area because it's by the highway. But then as housing prices escalated, this zoning was already in place, and people came knocking on people's doors, and it's really been surprising to me that this is a place where people would want to build and buy expensive townhomes, but they do, and maybe they like this old Hampton corridor. But anyway, there's really not any much opportunity for anything other than townhome development there, so it's kind of right now kind of a mismatch in terms of the map.
Are you saying the only thing with the R2B, the highest density we could do is a townhome in there?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, so unless it's a long Hampton corridor, which allows for the higher density. Yeah. And there are some single-family homes still in there. I mean, some potential areas for where you could get a couple lots together for a development, but then you'd have to do a PUD at that point.
Anybody else? Brenda?
Well, yeah, if you just want my thoughts on it. Those yellow areas, potential conflict, I would, if we meet the goals that the state set out with other areas of Englewood, and this gives you an opportunity to kind of walk away, I would of course recommend that too, and avoid the conflict. That's would be my take on that. But, I'll let the committee decide.
No.
Yes, so just pointing out that now this is what we would consider an optional transit area. The Wellness District is really dense, and we have supported for many years our shuttle. There are bus routes, like the Downing route comes down and then cuts over. So there is a lot of potential for transit ridership in here, but it is optional. It's not mandatory. So that's something that you will probably also have to discuss as to whether you want to pursue that or not.
Good.
I just want to say I support the resolution as described in your slides, and designating both of these areas as residential transition areas. I think that is in line with what we've talked about in the Broadway corridor as well. Like, it's not about mixed use, it's about increasing density. You made the point that these hospitals are going to continue to expand, and as they continue to expand, having, denser and more affordable, hopefully, workforce housing is important. This is a highly desirable area that has access to, easy access to multiple sort of commercial corridors, of our downtown area. And so I think, shying away from the idea that this could potentially, be more dense, to me doesn't make sense. When you have an area like this that's so close to so many things, moving towards added density just makes sense.
I would say the comment I have here is pretty much the same as the MUR 3A. On a R2B lot, you can build up to 3 ADUs, so it might be another opportunity to be able to further split those lots and have individual ownership of smaller homes and smaller lots instead of having it all be for rent properties.
The only other thing I'd like to see maybe on this map is the quarter mile off Downing. It feels like that is a corridor that is well used, especially with the fact that it turns down Old Hampton and goes straight to Inglewood Station. I think it's a pretty well utilized corridor.
Would you be supportive of densification along that corridor?
Yeah, I mean the Hamden corridor, yes. I hear what you're saying. So, all right, maybe I'll retract my statement of putting that corridor on there. Okay, retract it.
Other thoughts? I think the potential resolutions you describe, as Noah said, I think makes sense. Does anybody have any objection to that, supporting that?
Of what, just of all that mixed-use transitional in the potential
Leaving.
areas of conflict?
Yeah, there's potential resolutions listed on the slide there for these conflicts.
Evaluate options for infill. Just these. And that's so leave the 3300 block designated as residential transition. Leave it. Mm-hmm. And downgrade 3500 block to mixed use.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and maybe with the first one, just don't mention those so specifically, like townhomes. Don't mention that.
Yep. Yeah. I think we're in agreement with that.
Okay. All right. Moving on to near south. So this is focused. These two are focused on Oxford Station. There's north side of Oxford Avenue and the south side, and so they are complementary in that way. NS1, integrate a wide variety of mixed land uses, including neighborhoods serving retail and housing opportunities and creative industrial flex and startup space within the existing industrial framework north of the Oxford LRT station. And then for the south side, support additional large-scale multi-unit housing developments south of the Oxford LRT station. Are we in support?
No?
Yeah, so this is my neighborhood here, so feel strongly about this one. I would actually combine these, I think. From my point of view, like neighborhood serving retail would be great on both sides of Oxford. Like you've got these underutilized, previously industrial spaces now, and large-scale multi-unit housing development is one possibility, but I would love to see that then combined, and you've already got a lot of it, right, going in or already in existence south of Oxford. But it would be great for all of that new residential to also be served by nearby neighborhood serving retail. And so I think I don't see the need to necessarily divide this into the like north of Oxford, south of Oxford division. I would say I like these goals, and I think that just kind of a broader, more flexible approach on both sides of Oxford makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I can support that.
Other thoughts? All right, I think you have it.
Okay. All right, then we shift to the Broadway corridor. So this is, you've heard this before, is a very similar pattern. Explore expansion of missing middle housing opportunities adjacent to the South Broadway commercial corridor, and evaluate options for infill townhome development within a quarter mile of the Broadway corridor. Do we support?
Yeah, I think this tracks with everything else we've been talking about. Yep. Other thoughts? Yep.
All right, far south, similar. It's the same thing. Explore expansion of missing middle housing opportunities adjacent to the Broadway corridor. Evaluate options for infill townhome within a quarter mile of the Broadway corridor.
Any thoughts differing for this this zone?
I would like to add one thing about this zone is one thing we haven't talked about a lot that does fit within the sort of missing middle and mixed use definitions is like live work type situations, and I think this area in particular is potentially suitable for that along Broadway. There's a lot of older buildings that could potentially be either replaced or refreshed to a live work sort of model to support small business development on this part of Broadway. And I think that we should consider not just the residential areas, but also kind of how can we actually get some of that missing middle in the commercial mixed use, on Broadway as well.
Anybody else? I think it's good feedback to add. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think this is the last one, Southwest. So this area is a bit different than what we have on Broadway. We do not really necessarily have a full commercial area on Federal. It's really more of a 1950s, 60s suburban style shopping center with a little bit on the corner there. And then up here is essentially more of industrial. It's kind of storage currently now. And then of course, the rest of it is all single family, basically. So it's a very different corridor. So policies for this is that potentially we might want to encourage incremental landscaping and facade improvements for new neighborhood serving retail businesses and infill housing development opportunities along certain portions of South Federal. And we might want to explore the potential transition of underutilized industrial land to the east of there as new housing development opportunity sites along the West Union corridor. There's lots of opportunities right here in this zone, as well as in the I-1 as well, that we might want to think about as potential residential sites. Is the commission in support of these policies?
I'm not clear on where you're thinking with the incremental landscaping and facade improvements. Like which part of the corridor are you?
Centennial Shopping Center, basically.
Okay.
And maybe the other side of the street.
Gotcha.
And so by that, do you also mean sort of placemaking, sort of like identity for this area, bringing connectedness to the, okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's, this shopping center has been upgraded quite a bit. I remember when I first started working here, this is the worst King Soopers ever in any place in the whole metro, but it's really nice now. And then they came along and they really refurbished a lot of this, and it's really pretty well utilized. So I don't really see this going away. So it really is, how can we make the property more functional and more attractive? Another thing, I think the other big thing is how do we get people to get across there safely?
Yeah, I think these are valuable. I like the, well, let me go back to the language here. Yeah, no, the industrial, similar to how we talked about near the treatment plant, just new and novel ideas for smaller format or transitional type housing support on some of this land. So, yeah, I'm in support of these. Anybody else? Carl, you have your light on over there.
The Centennial Park area, why is that not being talked about? I mean, that's a huge park there, and a lot can be done with that.
Well, what would you propose? Is there something that you have more specific that you'd like to, that you've thought about it?
There's a couple of ball fields there, but put in more ball fields, I guess.
Okay.
Pickleball courts, that's popular, something like that. Have fishing derbies at the lake. Stock it and have some fishing derbies there for little kids, and I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities you can do with that. That's a wide open park. Not a whole lot of trees there. Maybe put some trees in there.
So that's generally more geared for the park's master plan. For the city's master plan, we're looking at land use on private property and not really talking about how we program our parks. So if you have ideas for that, we can get you in touch with the Parks Department. But generally, that's why we don't talk about what to do in parks, because there's a different department that works on master planning their park property. So that's generally why we don't talk a whole lot about what to do in the parks.
So also, I read in the paper the other day that in the I-1 area there, it's a large auto auction going in there.
That's not Inglewood Lane.
No, that's,
I think that's just north of Centennial Park.
yeah.
Yeah, someone bought that. But I wasn't really aware of what they were going to do. Okay, auto auction.
In the,
It's unincorporated Arapahoe County, yeah, and it's a auto auction. It's the old RV parking storage.
well, the one I-1 is that just west of the waste management?
Yes, it is.
That's where that's going.
Oh. No, it's north of Centennial Park.
What's labeled I-1 on that map is Centennial Park. Or that.
It's up here.
I think the area west of the waste management is a concrete plant or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's sane.
Yeah, behind that.
And there's some other storage here, like automobile, RV storage, and maybe even here. I can't really remember. And I think you're looking at some kind of other PUD there, which I couldn't tell you exactly where that is either. But somewhere in there.
Any other comments
Okay.
for,
Yeah,
oh,
let's-
sorry, go ahead, Carl.
All right. And then to wrap up, I just wanted, this was also mentioned that this is important, that we wanted to bring forward some of what happened from the Affordable Housing Task Force into this, because these aren't really geographical, because they never got into the geographical policy level, putting them under citywide. And so establish a long-term affordable housing fund derived from a wide variety of predictable sources that can distribute impactful resources amongst a number of affordable housing stakeholder groups in order to serve a complete range of affordable housing rental and ownership needs. And CW2, establish a permanent affordable housing advisory board and an affordable housing coordinator position to allocate and monitor fund resources and outcomes.
I support these.
So
Carl?
where's the affordable housing funds coming from?
We don't know that yet. We have that has council. So the Affordable Housing Task Force recommended looking at a lot of different sources to fund that, but not necessarily just one over another. And the council has heard their presentation and made a few complimentary comments, but they have not really discussed this stuff yet. It hasn't been publicly discussed, so we're kind of going out on a limb a little bit with some of these policies because we don't know where they necessarily stand at this point.
Okay, all right.
As a member of that task force, I appreciate kind of forcing the issue a little bit and putting it in front of council in this manner. I think this is a great place for it. Did you have something, Colin? No?
I was literally going to say the same thing. Like, if we have the opportunity to put it in, let's push it a little bit. So,
Yep. Carl?
I agree with most of this, but the density thing is, I don't totally agree with a lot of the density parts of it. And that's what a lot of it is. So what is this going to be? When if it goes through, council approves it, is it any kind of regulation? Is it code? What is this going to be?
That's hard to say.
I can probably answer that.
Go ahead. Give it a good
So
try.
it doesn't, anything done here does not just carte blanche rezone property. I can tell you that right now. This is what we use when we are evaluating, zoning cases and zoning requirements. When somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to change this area to this, we look back at this map and these policies and say, oh, does that rezoning meet the policies that were created for this area? If it doesn't, then we would say, oh, well, we as staff cannot recommend approval of this because it doesn't meet the policies that were set out in our comprehensive plan. Now, if it does meet them, then we could say, hey, we can recommend approval of this. And we point those things out to you all. Whenever we bring a zoning case to you all, we go in there and note it's in this area. We have these policies. It meets these policies that were created when this comprehensive plan was created. So yeah, it does not just carte blanche rezone anything. It says if things are going to happen, here's where we think they should happen, or where we expect to see these things happen, or here's what we're looking for in these areas. So no, it doesn't just rezone. And some of the density requirements or the density conversations we're having, again, they're triggered by those state laws. They're going to be ongoing because we don't know where that transit station or transit area boundary is ultimately going to be set by city council. Right now, we just know the boundary of how we have to do our analysis. And in that analysis, I can give you the number. It's about 24,000 units. So that's what our capacity is supposed to be. We are above that. I think it's 23,000 and change, and we're over like 26,000, and we did very conservative analysis. So we actually have a tool that we get from the Department of Local Affairs that will help us create a very not necessarily conservative. The numbers will probably be much higher than what we've anticipated, but ultimately council will get to decide, do we want it to be just this area that's already designated by this law, or do we want to squish it into these certain areas where we think we want to see the most dense development? And then it would, reflect on our comprehensive plan. Those kind of things change. It's very, it's always evolving, which is why we relook at this every 5 years, because in 5 years, things may look totally different. I think if you'd have told somebody 10 years ago that we'd have, townhomes south of Hamden, between Hamden and Kenyon, they might have laughed at you. Now we have those. We also have a large apartment building. We have 2 other apartment buildings that are on their way. So it evolves. That's why we look at this every few years, because it's going to change. It's going to continue to change as we develop.
So these are the guiding principles that'll help inform those decisions to happen in the future.
It basically says affordable housing is important and the city needs to take some action, and it's going to need money, and it's going to need guidance to figure out these different things, where it goes, because that hasn't been figured out. And we need some staffing. And other than that, it's all still to be determined.
So a lot of this is on increased density. Is there any studies or research gone into areas where there's been 1,000 or 2,000 apartments built as to the increase in businesses' sales tax in that area?
I would guess there's lots of things out there about that. That seems to be what the literature always says, is that if rooftops follow, or retail follows rooftops, and we know that people always are. Everybody pretty much universally would like to see more businesses on Broadway, but the reality of it, unless there's more people and with more financial resources, you will only get a small marginal incremental increase on Broadway. And mostly what you'll still be left with is still these unappealing car lots.
So I think for these two, and Carl, to your concern of density, neither of these two policies speak to density specifically. They're just saying establish an affordable housing fund, hire a person, and put together an advisory board to look at how we can increase affordable housing. It doesn't say add density for affordable housing. It just says do these, at least these two are saying, do these 2 things to figure out what the best path to increasing affordable housing supply in Inglewood is. Is that fair?
Yeah, and there's so many facets to the affordable housing space, in the fact that there's so many different groups that have different needs. There's rental versus ownership, and so some of the affordable housing policies that most likely will be followed will be, we're probably trying to work more with Habitat for Humanity, and they're all about single family, trying to either build new single family or rehab existing single family, and then making sure that through certain mechanisms is made affordable permanently. So, but yes, there is, on the other side, we have here in Inglewood, we have our Inglewood Housing Authority projects for seniors, and there's no way that those things can really exist unless they were 7 stories, because that's for the poorest of the poor.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it earlier, the modular houses. If you take a acre and then put a bunch of you divide it up and put modular houses in there, you could easily come up with a $300,000 house, and that's affordable. Nowadays, it's affordable.
Yeah.
So if you could do that, I don't see why it's not being talked about.
I think you'd be hard pressed to come up with a modular home that you'd be able to sell at $300,000.
Well, considering the cost of an acre of land in Inglewood, that's,
I know a guy that's got a 2-story modular house, and it's really nice. It's a beautiful house.
Yeah.
Solid.
I agree. Modular homes are very nice, and they're built in a factory, so they're not out exposed to any weather. And oftentimes they're built a little bit sturdier because of the transport that they have to go through over the highway. So totally agree with your perspective on modular homes. It's just with the cost of the dirt, it's more expensive.
let's go, we've got some comments, let's go to Colin and then Brenda, and let's try to focus on the question at hand of the two policy proposals.
Yeah, the only thing I'm wondering is we got 1, 2, and 3, which is on the next page, that are all kind of similar, of the same vein. Is there a reason why we're keeping them all separate as opposed to just having them as one?
Are you referring to the chart that has all the policies?
No, the citywide 1, citywide 2, and citywide 3.
Oh, let's see. Oh, there's a couple more. No, this is just how they fit on these pages. So let's talk about these ones too. Continue to investigate and adopt affordable housing policies and unified development code changes, as well as affordable housing community support and access programs. And number 4, partner with major employers, philanthropic foundations, and affordable housing groups to provide a variety of affordable housing opportunities to the Inglewood community. So CW4 is kind of a rewrite of that one that talked about partner with the hospitals, and we've broadened that. So it's major employers and more other groups, and not just specifically around the hospitals. So that was something that I think we listened to you guys, and then I think CW3 is one of the themes that came from Affordable Housing Task Force that the city needs to continue to look at, investigate our policies and our code to look at ways that can be made more feasible for affordable housing, and also to look at support and access programs as well for more challenged populations.
And I guess my only thought, I like what these are all saying. Does it make sense to have them as 3 separate ones in your mind to keep that distinct, or is it make sense to combine them all and talk about affordable housing with all of these items put in there? Is my only question. If you think it's better to have 3 separate ones, great. I just want to make sure we're all in agreement on how to present it.
I think they would be very lengthy if I was to start combining them. And I think they are somewhat different ideas. So I think I would prefer to keep them separate.
I would only see the vulnerability as council, like, oh, we like 2 out of these 4, and yeah. So no.
I was just going to say what John said. I do think they express different ideas. I think you've got the fund, you've got the position and the board, so like personnel, and then you've got policies and then partnerships. So I see, different topics here.
Anything commissioners would request to modify or wouldn't support in general as they're written? I think we've got consensus on those, John.
Okay. So now it's commissioner's choice. Has any commissioners flagged any additional policies in the chart that they would like to bring up to the floor?
I appreciate you putting us up with us last week when we had some of those, so I'm good.
Brenda?
I'm good. Good work. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this was very responsive to our input and feedback, and this has really gone well. So yeah, thank you. All right, thanks, John.
Okay, and then there's still a chance to offer up new policies. Does anybody have any new policies? Colin did offer a policy just in a different place, and I've got that down, but something similar to that vein is Colin offered up the policy that we should be seeking out more green space in the wellness district. Does anybody have anything that came to them in the last few weeks that they'd like to add?
Yeah, the one thing that I'd like to add is the accessory dwelling units now can be 25 feet tall, but no taller than the single-family home. If people want to put an ADU in their, build an ADU, and they have an existing garage, oftentimes they're going to have to knock that detached garage down in order to build the ADU, and then their garage goes away because they're not able to build the apartment on top of the garage, because that would be higher than the single-family home, taller than the single-family home. So I would suggest that I think we should change the policy that the ADUs don't have to be shorter than the single-family home, than the primary.
So this is a suggested change to code.
What I'll say is that's very specific, but we're already talking about that internally in response to one of the ADU laws that the state legislature passed, and that one of the council members brought that up as a concern, and we've already started talking as staff as to what that change would look like. Ultimately, it still has to come to you and the council, but we're working on just draft updates to come back and do some study sessions with you all. For our ADU regulations to meet the new state law, we only really have to make one change compared to the host of changes that other cities have to make. So I think that's pretty impressive on your part, since most of you were part of Code Next, so thank you. But that's a secondary change that we've talked about making, is essentially just eliminating that but no taller than the home, and just saying you can go up to 25 feet. I'll just tell you that's what we've discussed internally.
Great, thank you.
It's very effective, Eric.
Yeah, good job, Eric. I feel like I remember we talked about that in the Code Next update, and I don't remember why. I guess I would just be curious on there must have been some reasoning why we said that it couldn't be taller than the existing structure. And I remember talking about having to lose garages, and I didn't necessarily agree with it, but yeah.
I remember we just made sure it was subservient to the main unit. And you can get a variance. You can apply for a variance and some people, most of the time you get them. You just have to variance is kind of like getting permission from your neighbors, as long as it doesn't bother anybody. I got a variance for mine, just based on, there used to be setback allowances. And I was off by 3 feet, and I had to go to 2 variance meetings for that. But, it sounds like it's going to change anyway.
Sure, and what I would throw on there is the variance process is not that easy. You have to have very specific hardships that are generally part of your property's issue of why you can't do something very specific. But the reality is, when we write those laws about accessory buildings, it's really, to what Brenda said, is to make sure it's subservient to the house. But what we see is the unintended consequences. Someone can just attach that garage to your house, build an ADU above it, and it still does the same thing. And now we have something closer to the street that looks a little bit out of place than if we would have just let it be built 20, 25 feet further back. So we're starting to think, oh, well, maybe that does make a lot more sense to just say, that's the only way you can get taller, is if you build an ADU above your garage. The garage still has a height limitation of 16 feet, but it can be taller if you build an ADU. So that's kind of our thought process behind it right now.
New policy recommendations, suggestions? I think we're there.
All right, thank you. That's really it for today. So I'll give back the floor.
Thank you. Let me get back to my agenda. So I do this in order. Thanks, John. We will go to staff's choice.
I don't have anything. I will say we do have a public hearing coming up. I think we're putting the notices out right now. It should be, I think, the first meeting in March. It's one of the 2 meetings in March. It's a public hearing for the expansion of an outdoor storage facility. John pointed it out on the southwest map. There's an area that they're looking to expand an existing facility.
Okay. Thank you.
I have nothing either.
Thanks. Attorney's choice.
I don't have any updates either, but thank you.
All right. Thank you. And commissioner's choice. Why don't we just start down there and we'll move across?
Nothing here really.
I'm good.
I don't have anything.
I just wanted to real quickly highlight the council study session a couple weeks ago at this point, where you guys presented them with the state laws and they responded. There was a lot of chest thumping about local control around the parking minimums and the potential that the city would just ignore the state law. And I think that conversation to me really missed the point that parking minimums in themselves are an imposition on the market, right? It's the city telling developers what they have to do instead of letting the market decide. So the idea that it's the more libertarian position to impose parking minimums doesn't make a lot of sense. And I would love to see the city staff and legal staff, pushing back on the idea that we can just ignore that new state law and, roll the dice with litigation. That is not something I think the city should be doing.
Can I answer that? There's an election in November. That's all I'll say.
Colin?
I can't follow that. No, I'm good. Thanks. It was good.
Nothing further.
All right. Then with that, thank you again to staff. This was a well-planned, well-thought-out, well-organized session. So thank you all. With that, we adjourn.